Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Lodgify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.
Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information that you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going, Leo?
I'm very well, Sarah. How are you?
Yeah, fabulous. Friday morning, almost into the weekend.
Oh, it's a win, isn't it? Fresh bunch of flowers I see in the background there. Great.
Yes,
Is it always the
yeah.
same florist that you go to, or is it sometimes a different one?
It is. There's one right below my house. I think I make her day every Monday. I go and buy flowers. So she's always like, "Look what I have this week." So yeah, it's really cute.
I love it. I love it. First time here we are as a two. So, very excited about that as well. And excited to have you without you being somewhere glamorous or exotic. You're normally traveling somewhere, aren't you? Have you been on holiday this week, or have you actually been working, Sarah?
I've actually been working this week, believe it or not. I did pop down to Malaga for just Wednesday, basically for the Vitour conference. I was there for a day. And then back to reality. So that's my last travel, I think, for a while. I'm staying home for a bit, finally.
Yeah, I bet. How was Malaga? Was it good?
Yeah, really, really good. I love the kind of more local events. So this is mostly focused on kind of the Spanish market, of course. I'm based in Barcelona, so it was interesting to kind of learn about what's going on and talk about regulations with other operators and kind of see the pain points as well on a more local level. So yeah, it was great.
It's the R word, isn't it? Again, which we just can't escape, I think, especially where Europe's concerned. I think at the EU level, they're really turning the screw, aren't they, the whole time? So I guess that came up as a theme throughout the day, right?
That was, I would say, the biggest theme is pretty much, there was legislators there. There were the alcaldes, so like the mayors of some of the different major cities throughout Spain. And then, of course, all the operators. And so I think what really was coming out as the theme was regulation being put into place without access to data or without having the full picture of what's really going on. It can be dangerous. And so we, as an industry, have to kind of band together to set the record straight so that if and when regulations come into play, they're being made on a fair playing field and with data in mind rather than some anecdote of your cousin who can't find a place to rent because somebody has an Airbnb, right?
Yeah. No, it's right, isn't it? And they managed to get policymakers in the room then at this conference.
They did, yeah. Carlos, the organizer, did an amazing job getting a lot of the major stakeholders into the room and in those conversations. And we were able to sit down with some of them. So it was great to be able to share real data with them. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is, but there's, I don't know, let's say 17,000 listings in Madrid. Okay, but if we filter that out, maybe half of those are what you would consider relevant. Or like an actual business operating. And so I think just understanding the magnitude of the problem or of the size of the market for them from their point of view. For me, it's not a problem. I think it's a good thing. But for them, what they view as a problem that's taking away housing, I think to quantify that for them in a way that makes sense is really important because otherwise they can get blown out of proportion.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Any other takeaways from the conference? Anything that jumped out to you, like who's booming, who's flying, or was it just all pretty standard STR stuff?
I think it was pretty standard STR stuff. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing is still, because of a lot of the regulations coming into play, a shift towards this kind of hybrid midterm versus short-term model. So there's a lot of talk of like student housing, which I know we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and this being what to me has always been like an older avenue, I guess, for rentals, but apparently it's the talk of the town. So I think there's a lot of owners wanting to switch to sort of the student model during the year and then having the ability to do short term in the summer when school wasn't in session. And other than that, just innovation. So there's so many new companies popping up that are doing this and getting involved, and the growth rates are really astonishing still in terms of new management companies coming into the market, which is exciting to see. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I take your point on the student accommodation. We did talk about it, isn't it? It does feel a bit retro, the idea that, like when I was, and this is going back a long time, when I was a student, we had to vacate our rooms in the summer because they would be rented out to holidaymakers, right? That was the norm, except it wasn't tech enabled and it wasn't done by management companies taking central contracts. So yeah, I do think it's interesting. I think this is part of it's been an interesting start to the year for lots of people around Europe. So I think it's management companies looking for new avenues of growth, isn't it? Really, oftentimes. And we're going to dig into that a bit more when we talk about earnings as well. Well, look, your week's been more exciting than mine. Not that I begrudge it. I've had a very hands-on childcare week. I was telling Sarah before we jumped on, I was up at 2:00 this morning with my daughter having a tea party. So while Sarah was enjoying champagne in Malaga and things like that, I was up pretending to sip tea with my daughter. But I wouldn't change it. It's great. It's the joys of life. It does mean as well that I'm very excited about traveling to Scale very soon and getting to hang out in person. Promise me we can drink some champagne, Sarah.
Absolutely, we will. I'll take you to my favorite bar.
Okay. But yeah, we've got Scale coming up. You'll see us there. We'll be recording there too. I think what's really exciting as we come into this time of year is that there's an energy, I think, around summer bookings and the things that are happening. And obviously, we'll talk about it. We've agreed that to Rafi's despair that we're going to constantly talk about the Paris Olympics and to constantly talk about the Euros as we come into this time of year. But it feels like conferences are starting to happen again and people are getting together and we're talking about that inevitable summer peak that's going to come. So in a minute, we'll talk Paris. Before we do, I wasn't here last week, but I can't not mention the Guesty move. Guesty acquiring Rentals United. I'm still blown away by it. What a massive move. What an exciting move for the industry. Like, Sarah, where were you when you heard the news?
I actually got a notification from Guesty in my inbox. So I was traveling and I thought, what is this? Reached out to a couple of people and it seems everybody for me, it was completely unexpected. I wasn't necessarily looking for that. I'm curious to see how the integration kind of goes of those two. It seems like for now, things are still going to be pretty separate. So it's more of an acquisition in name rather than sort of a strategical takeover, if you will. Yeah. I'm curious to see kind of how it all plays out. I think it's a big change for the industry. I do think we're going to continue to see a lot more of this type of consolidation within the industry. Whereas, especially if you're a property manager, the more often you can have one software system to work through and everything else is kind of on the background, I think the easier it's going to be for the industry. Super, super excited to see how it all shakes out. What about you?
I think that's right. I like what you said there. It's trying to meet your customer where they are. We're obviously obsessed with that ourselves at Superhog, right? Is your customer just the sort of person who wants to deep dive and investigate everything they're buying and have a direct relationship, or are they much more wedded to one piece of software? And I think there's always been that use case. I guess that's where the strategy comes in behind it, because clearly there will always be that host that wants to go and buy from several different vendors. So I don't know if it'll be as straightforward as everyone just gets rolled up into one another, or if there will still people be, because at the moment you turn around and there's 5 new pieces of software in our industry. Like I heard it described as a mushroom industry, which I think was perfect. And it is. So, there is those two things going on, new bits of tech. Let's not even mention AI, because that's another episode that we can go into. There's all these things that are changing the day-to-day of property management versus companies rolling it up. So I think it'll be a balance for a while yet, but I think it's really exciting, and it shows the impressive growth of Guesty, right? That they're at this point that they're able to make this acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Sarah, let's do it. Let's get into it. We could talk all day, can't we? We have talked about my favorite topic, and I hope Rafi's watching this somewhere. Sarah, what's happening? Paris Watch. What's happening pre-Olympics?
Paris Watch. Oh, it's not great news, guys.
Oh, no.
So it's slowing down. So we're 2.5 months out from the start of the Olympics. Occupancy is still pacing significantly lower even than this time last year. So we're seeing a lot of reticence to book still for the Paris Olympics. We are continuing to see that growth mostly in the suburban areas outside of the Paris city center. But it's not nearly the same as it was. So previously, I think we were looking at figures of 154% growth. Right now, that's dropped down to 55% growth year over year in terms of number of active listings. Occupancy pacing still were about 26% last year for these same dates, whereas right now we're at 16%. So occupancy still pacing well below. And then I think also something to look at would be when we look at the booking lead time for these kind of stays, 68% of all bookings that happened last year were made within 2 months of travel. So I think it's not a panic moment yet. It's still pretty normal for that market. So there is time for it to recuperate. But one would think that with the Olympics coming up, you would book much farther in advance than sort of that standard lead time. When it comes to rates, again, I think, that's still pretty consistent. So we're still seeing basically that double the normal nightly rate phenomenon, both in the suburban areas as well as in Paris city center. So not a massive change on that. But I think the most notable thing is booking pacing is well below what we would expect, even compared with last year, if the Olympics were not happening, much less assuming a massive global event like this. So it's a bit surprising, to be honest.
Very much so. Very much so. Okay, great. So it's still not too late for me to book my last minute tickets. And I would be interested to know, maybe we'll try and find this out, but when London 2012 happened, the event tickets themselves sold out in no time. It was a ballot and everybody wanted a piece of it, and people were coming in from all over the UK, not just Londoners. So I'm interested to know where they're at with their ticket sales, because that might reveal what will happen in the next couple of months, because I think it's unlikely that you'd come to Paris without a ticket to an event over those dates. So it might just be a bum time and not work,
Yeah. I mean, I just found something, just did a quick Google, right? This as in May of last year. So this is over a year ago. They had sold 70%. So I don't know where they're at now, but we can do another update. We'll look for that after the episode, maybe comment on it in the next couple of weeks when we have some more stats on how reservations are coming.
Very exciting. Let's keep talking about it. It's the summer of sport, so we want to focus on it massively. And let's move on. So we're starting today with the Booking.com earnings report and an article in FocusWire, which is why it's great we've got you here, Sarah, to look at some of this data, and we'll maybe bring into the conversation the comparison with Airbnb's report that's come out as well, and the different type of media we're seeing around, different type of press we're seeing around it. So yeah, Sarah, do you want to dig into it?
Absolutely. So Booking.com released their earnings, and essentially it was slightly less emotionally charged than the last earnings call. So back in February, there was a lot of talk around EU regulators and the fact that Booking.com does all of these kind of A/B tests and things like that. So that conversation, nobody brought it up this time. So Glenn Fogel had a little bit of a breather on that one. Their results, no doubt, were absolutely impressive. So they're showing pretty high growth rates. So looking at 17% year over year when it comes to revenue, of course their stock was up 5% the next day. So investors were pretty happy about that. I think something of note is that Glenn Fogel was really focused on the potential of AI, connected trips, their Genius loyalty program, which sort of touches on what the EU regulators were mentioning. I think it's also interesting in light of another article we'll talk about a little bit later of Airbnb possibly launching a program. But I think the most interesting thing to point out is when we look at these earnings and we compare it with Airbnb. So Airbnb is projecting for Q2 a growth rate of between 8 and 10%. Booking's looking at the same. So they're not looking at a significantly higher growth rate necessarily when it comes to overall revenues for Q2 guidance. So we're really confused about why investors are kind of panicked about Airbnb and less panicked about Booking. The only thing that I can kind of think is the mention of the EBIT numbers, right? So obviously the EBITDA numbers that Booking put out were pretty impressive. So the overall revenue growth is slightly smaller, but that EBIT was really significant in terms of growth. It was something upwards of 50%. So that's what my gut says, but with Airbnb, I'm always confused. Leo, I'm really confused. When they IPO'd, it was, the valuation was ridiculous for what it was at the time. It was severely overvalued when it went IPO. And then I think the market kind of course corrected. But with Airbnb, it seems like whenever they put out a release, even though we think it's positive, it doesn't always correspond with the reaction in the market and how the stock price acts. And so I think it's a phenomenon that is Airbnb kind of specific to me. It doesn't seem to happen with Booking or Expedia as much.
It doesn't, does it? I've never really understood why that is. Maybe because Airbnb is seen more. Maybe Airbnb is more closely linked to this, let's call it home sharing, short-term rental, whatever you want to call it. Whereas Booking.com has the fact that it's across hotels as well. Maybe it's the lodging type that Airbnb is in. That mean it's more. I mean, whenever we talk about regulation, everyone mentions Airbnb. You don't really mention Booking.com and Expedia in the same breath, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's absolutely true. I also think. I think it might be curious too. I mean, Booking has a much higher concentration of not only listings, but also reservations, for example, in the European market than maybe they do in the US, whereas Airbnb is the total opposite. Airbnb is much more kind of shifted towards that US market. So I think that's also something to keep in mind and to think about, not necessarily in number of listings, but in kind of ubiquity. I think Booking is definitely working on growing that market. And that's something that they were pointing out. So they're seeing still single digit growth in terms of nights booked in the US, but they consider that a good trajectory. ADRs are relatively flat. But when we look at other markets, everywhere else in the US is talking about how alternative accommodations has had the highest growth in the industry. And so I think that kind of juxtaposition is also interesting. I wonder if it's just a supposition. I wonder if that has anything to do with it in terms of the split of growth rates and the markets where each of those companies are stronger.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We can't ignore the fact that it says supply is up as well when we look at the Airbnb report. Sarah, any sense if are you seeing that in your data? So like, we're maybe going to see, hosts complaining because they feel like they're getting less bookings, but actually Airbnb generally is doing okay. It's just that there's less bookings to go around, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think I think this will be a great segue into another kind of article that we were going to discuss a little bit later, which is how hosts in the UK are kind of coming up with new ways of attracting those bookings. And I think it's definitely, you're absolutely right. So we're seeing the same sort of, we're definitely seeing that growth in terms of number of listings. Occupancies are relatively flat. There's not a huge difference necessarily in that over time, but it's about the share of the market and also about the nightly rate. So how do I increase the nightly rate to make sure that if demand isn't increasing at the same pace that the number of listings are, then I got to get my share of the pie. So on that front, I would agree. And I think also it's much easier for a company like Airbnb to have new listings. That supply is so flexible. And I think when you're an owner and you think about, okay, where am I going to list my property as a single owner operator? You probably think much more Airbnb or like a Vrbo before you would think of, say, a Booking.com. So I think for them, it is much easier to gain that supply. But they're not going to be as professionalized. They may be listings that are not listed full year round. So I think that's another factor, is the kind of, I guess, the ebb and flow of that supply and how stable those properties coming onto the market are.
Yeah, I think that's right. Clearly, we can't ignore that Airbnb and Booking.com combined represents the majority of the market in terms of demand coming in for most property managers. So what, in your view, and you might not have the data to speak to this, but I just think it's interesting. What to your view is going on in the industry? Is it just the market correcting itself, oversupply? Is it more to do with the post-COVID drop, I suppose, in the amount of we had a lovely bounce after COVID. It's come down, is settling down somewhere, or are people waiting for the summer, bad weather? What's your sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I will point out, and a colleague might give a presentation at Bitour, looking at the Spanish market, where we have seen a massive recovery post-COVID. So Spain is one of the markets in Southern Europe that's recovering at a higher pace even more so than, for example, Greece or Italy. The phenomenon that we have seen, however, is that I totally lost my train of thought, Leo. What was the question? I need another coffee. What happened?
If I ask you another question, you'll definitely come back to it. That's great. I really enjoyed that. There you go.
I just do a total blank.
I was going to say, oh no, I've kind of lost my. We'll pick it up. We'll get the thread. But who knows why? We're here to talk about STR. That's right. There you go. We've got too relaxed, Sarah. We're having too much of a nice chat. Sorry, audience. Let's turn it around on the audience as we try and gather ourselves and remember why we're here. Tell us how you're feeling about it. What are your Airbnb bookings looking like coming up? What are your Booking.com bookings coming like? I'm hearing anecdotally on the ground. This is why I love having Sarah here, by the way, because she's actually got data to talk about, just to enhance my unquantified opinions on things. But what I'm hearing on the ground anecdotally from hosts, especially in Europe, is that they're seeing Booking.com become a much more prominent channel for them than it has been in the past. And that's over the last 6 months to a year. So, Sarah, I mean, any thoughts on why that might be, and if that's a Europe trend? I guess it probably is, but yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting one, and it probably has to do with in my mind, all of these A/B tests that Booking is running. I mean, if hosts are seeing higher booking rates on a specific OTA, then everyone's happy. I think ultimately as well, especially if you have your property listed with multiple OTAs, as you probably would, if you want to maximize revenue, then it doesn't really matter where bookings come from, right? I mean, you'll adjust your price depending on the platform based on their fees, but as long as you have bookings coming in, you're happy about that. So I don't know. I think that's something to keep in mind. I remember what I was going to say, Leo, about the Spanish market. I knew you'd get there. I know. What I was getting at was, you're absolutely right about the post-COVID growth. So we had this, massive trajectory at post-COVID, and we're thinking this is great recovery, blah, blah, blah. We still haven't reached levels of 2019 yet when it comes to demand, at least in Spain. So that's the data that I was looking at all week after that presentation. But I think that's something of note where, I think it's really easy to say, okay, we've got a massive recovery post-COVID. We're coming back to the new normal. We're still not at 2019. So I think there's definitely still room for growth there. And that I would use as like a message to kind of calm people down a little bit, especially when they're thinking, oh, there's so many more listings. There needs to be a higher number of listings to kind of meet that demand, but the demand still hasn't even gotten to where it was before. So I'm not concerned about the number of listings. And average nightly rates are still remaining strong. So until that curve gets inverted, that's when I think hosts have to start worrying.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. I'm glad you remembered what your point was, because it was definitely worth hearing. And I guess I hadn't really considered that, but it's interesting. So we're not even back to pre-2019 levels, when I guess, people around the world as well have less money to spend at the moment. Cost of living crisis happening in many parts of Europe and America. So yeah, I feel like economic headwinds are obviously a factor in this, and again, give us 12 months, and I think we'll be in a much stronger position. So yeah, very, very interesting. Already cool. So we'll keep an eye on those. We'll keep reporting on those earning reports as and when they come out. Sarah, that's been really interesting. Let's go on to the next article that we've kind of come onto this idea of loyalty. So it's an article in Skift about Airbnb toying with having an Amazon Prime style membership program or something similar. So apparently not looking at the traditional points model. And I could talk about points all day, so I have to be careful here, Sarah. Rein me in if I keep going about how much I love loyalty points. But the idea here is it's trying to drive loyalty without, I guess, affecting revenue by devaluing a customer that's already your loyal customer by just throwing points at them, and also the admin behind it, but also making people feel like they're getting access to exclusive discounts, benefits, events. I guess they feel like they're part of the club. And I think Airbnb, more so than any other OTA in the space, has that progressive, modern, very sort of like loyal customer base that travels with it and only with it. So I think it's probably playing into that. It's not just saying, look, we'll give you discounts to users more. It's saying you're part of us. This is how we travel. We all share the vision. So in that respect, I think it's smart. But overall, my sense is that if it's an Amazon Prime style membership, it's going to be monthly fees. Very, very hard to add value every month to your customer or every quarter, however much you bill them. It might just feel like window dressing, because I guess, I book on all the OTAs, or I book on a direct booking website if I find it via Google. The first thing I do is search, right? I'm not necessarily heading to one particular platform and doing that. So, for me, it's just an absolute non-starter. Whereas if there was a loyalty program, an Airbnb, Booking.com's obviously got Genius, and which you mentioned earlier, and I think Vrbo One Key is similar. If there was just discount on different products, and obviously Booking.com can give you car rental discounts and hotel discounts, so there's different things they can pull there. But if there was you're accruing points, I think that would drive me back more than the idea of being a member and part of the club. Now, maybe I'm too old, maybe I'm not the right demographic, I don't know, but to me it just feels like a nice puff piece, but I don't know actually in reality if it has legs, versus just giving people a reason to say, wow, I've collected 5,000 Airbnb points, this is fantastic, I can't wait to make my next booking. And like, honesty call, right? I love collecting airline points. I never spend them. I just like collecting them.
I got to tell you, I don't get it. I don't understand the idea of having a subscription to Airbnb. I mean, I'm wondering how often, and I travel, how often would I have to travel to make that work, that worth my while?
And you do travel. You're always on holiday. You're always, I'm surprised you're even here today.
I'm not loyal to, and I don't think, I'm not loyal to them now. So why would I pay them a monthly subscription? I don't know. I'm just trying to think of who the actual client would be for that. What, and also what subset of their user base loves them so much and travels enough that it would actually be worth their while. I think they would have to drive tremendous value, whether that is, I don't know. I mean, you're going to have somebody who's a frequent traveler, and you're going to have to understand the profile of whether they're doing that for business versus leisure. And then you're going to have to start giving them, I don't know, like a free drink at some bar or what, but still you wouldn't do that. I'm thinking, I just genuinely don't get it. I like the Genius program, and there are times where I'll book on Booking or another OTA that's offering me points or some kind of other discount specifically, unless it's obviously lower on the direct booking site. But I think that's the whole point of a lot of those programs, is so the OTAs are not losing market share to direct bookings. And the only real way to do that is, I hate to bring the word price parity into it, but if I can get it cheaper direct, then I will. So, I think the OTAs are at risk there sometimes of losing relevance, but I really don't get the subscription program. I know Will was all for it. Oh, you should have chat with him earlier. He thinks it's great. So maybe we should ask Will, why would you pay for that? I don't know. I don't get it.
We really should. We need to do a separate episode with Will, don't we? Just explaining why he likes the idea of it so much. I'm the same. We don't get it. It's I think price is a massive part of it, isn't it? It's just like, I want it. Oh, he's hopping in.
Oh no, he couldn't stand it.
So you guys talking crap over here? Just kidding. No. I just wanted to say, love the episode. You guys are doing great. This is awesome. I'll explain my reasoning on why I would pay for a membership another date. You guys, this is it's a whole episode basically. So yeah.
So next week, Sarah and I will turn the camera on Will and interrogate him about that. No, I think it's interesting that for me, it's I just want to pay the fair amount and the right amount, and so I'm looking for that. So again, you're right to repeat what you said. Rate parity is super important, which is why everyone's obsessed with it. And then I want to pick and choose what I want to do in destination. But again, it could be that this feels like Airbnb saying the thing they think their customer wants to hear, less they're actually going to get down and do it, because the logistics behind it are really challenging when you work in as many markets as they do, which is why I think their experiences in general have struggled, right? Because it's not actually, people just want to book and then they want to go and do their own thing when they get to their destination. Cool. All right. Well, that's a swing and a miss for both of us. We're definitely not going to be signing up to any loyalty programs.
Sorry, Airbnb.
Yeah. Third article today. And again, I was excited to finish with this just because it feels like, good old fashioned how do I get more guests? And I really like this. I really like this because it often comes up in conversation day to day when you're on the ground with people. How do I get more guests? How do I make my properties more bookable? So it's an article from the Telegraph, Hot Tubs and Axe Throwing, how British holiday lets are raising their game to survive. Before I go into it, Sarah, axe throwing, I mean, that's enough to make you book, isn't it?
No. Not for me. I mean, maybe it would be if I was booking a castle. You know, I feel like it has to go with the theme of whatever the place is. If somebody just offered me axe throwing, I don't know that would increase my chances of booking, if I'm honest. But I think what is interesting to point out is it's not really about increased occupancy with a lot of these things. I think that's what the article kind of makes it out to be, of like, oh, we want to increase our chances of getting bookings. I mean, at least if you look at certain amenities, I mean, we don't have data for axe throwing because this is still really new as an amenity offered, or amenity, as you would say. We talked about the tomato earlier. But for us, if you look at listings in the UK, for example, with a hot tub, 59.9% occupancy, without a hot tub, 58.6%. So, I mean, minimal, right? Negligible, less than 1% difference in occupancy. What is interesting is the ADR and the RevPAR of those properties. And that's why people are adding these things. So it's not about getting a higher number of bookings. It's about getting more value out of each booking. So when we look at a property with a hot tub, for example, the average nightly rate is $373 USD versus $213 for a property without a hot tub. So it's not quite double, but I mean, well, upwards of 150% increase. And for the RevPAR, we see a similar trend. So it's nearly double the RevPAR when we look at properties with, for example, a hot tub in the UK versus without. So I think that's an important distinction that the article kind of misses, but I would love them to add axe throwing as an amenity so we can track it, because I would be super curious to see, first and foremost, what types of properties offer axe throwing. If it's more of like an urban phenomenon versus, like I said, something more along the lines of like a unique stay where it's part of the theme, I guess, of the property. And if it actually increases conversion rates, I'd love to see it like before the amenity was offered and then after, to see what happens there and what the data says. But I don't know. It wouldn't help me book again. I'm a big naysayer today. I don't know. They're having a hard time with me.
Yeah, with my risk management hat on, which I try not to wear too often on the podcast, but with my risk management hat, I'm thinking liability claims galore with axe throwing. So I'd actually be swaying people away from that amenity. I would say don't list that. The hot tub feels a lot safer. It gets us onto a point of like, when you're designing an STR, you can have a lot of fun with it. Like, I think that's what's very, very cool. And Humphrey, my CEO, he's got a few cottages out in the country, and he puts like standalone baths and, very, very cool design. And he puts his heart he loves it, puts his heart and his soul into it. And it makes a difference. It definitely moves the needle because it's thoughtful, curated. And that's what we want as an industry. We're trying to raise the bar so that people choose it as a lodging option over the hotel, because it does have that kind of beautiful, bespoke feel to it. And it's more private, right? Like, you're not going to book a hotel with a hot tub bath. That probably does nothing to the occupancy rate of a hotel room. It's just a bit meaningless. But whereas if you've got a nice secluded place in the country with a nice wood-fired hot tub, I can definitely see the appeal. And as an industry super fan, which I know you are too, I love it. I think it's great that we're styling in that direction, and we're not just sticking to the same old photos, pictures that are 30 years old, secondhand sofas, and that kind of that initial view of the industry in the pre-tech enabled days. And I think it shows how, if you're competing with 5 listings in your area, going that extra mile is encouraged, and therefore the industry in general sees an upward trend in its standards, and everyone suddenly thinks, oh wow, these are the sorts of things I need to do. I need to make sure that I have that standalone bath. I need to make sure I have some funky art in there. And if that's the way it's going, then I'm all for it. And I would say that, slightly inflammatory headline again, it goes back to what we were saying with the initial earnings report from Airbnb, is that, raising their game to survive is definitely inflammatory, because it's just, this is a way of getting more bookings. This is not literally people saying that they need to offer axe throwing in order to get any bookings in their reservation. So I think it's a good story for the industry. I don't think it's oh my God, the industry's dying and therefore people are going to the extremes. I think it's very much the bar's being raised. One bit I liked from the article was the idea that you arrived to the smell of freshly baked bread. Did you read that bit? I mean, come on.
It reminds me of some of these adverts that Airbnb puts out where it's, it's like a family and they're cooking s'mores and they're doing all these things. I've never been to an Airbnb where I was offered a s'mores kit. Let me tell you. I mean, I could be wrong. But this is very much in line with kind of the advertisements that Airbnb puts out, right? So I think this is a prime example of, and also just like you mentioned earlier, why somebody would choose an Airbnb over, for example, a service department or over a hotel. It is that kind of personalized touch in terms of the management of those properties. If you're a single owner operator, fine, I'll bake you some bread. But if you have 400 properties that you're managing or 1,000 properties that you're managing or even 50, that's a difficult standard to meet. So I think that kind of level of attention to detail, while amazing, I'm curious how that would be so replicable. And especially knowing that we are headed towards the professionalization of the industry. I don't know if I see the mismatch between those two things. I don't know if it's sustainable or even reasonable for professional operators to do those little details.
I love this. And that is a whole other debate because I think, and Sarah, we're having too much fun here. At some point, someone's going to tell us to stop talking, aren't they? Someone's going to cut us off, but it is a whole other debate and let's have it another week properly. But it's the $1 million question, isn't it? It's how much service can I add? And when I hit scale, how much can I serve a local market? What's the right number of properties to have? How personal does that service need to be? Mm-hmm. Again, we'll have that debate another day. But what I would say is what distinguishes our industry from other lodging types is this idea that you can have things personalized or really exciting design quirks in your properties that feel really authentic, right? A really well-designed house with a hot tub is always going to feel more authentic than a hotel room that has those touches. So I guess to answer your question, I would always be looking for things that don't need too much maintenance, right? So like, it is going to be a hot tub that can be cleaned, not a bread maker that can be turned on. But let me just say, in case any hosts are listening, please do the bread maker thing. One time I want to walk into a property and have that experience. I would go wild for that.
Let us know how it goes. I did have one Airbnb that I checked into. I was given fresh, but it was in the fridge. I was given fresh bread from a local bakery and some butter and jam or something as like a welcome kit. And that was actually nice. It didn't smell like fresh baked bread though. So not quite there, but almost.
We will just not be pleased today. We will not be pleased.
No.
Guys, that's been so cool, Sarah. It's been so nice to see you. Can't wait to have champagne with you very soon at scale when we get to hang out in person. Audience, if you've enjoyed the episode, please like, share, subscribe in all the usual social places. I'm going to give you the floor, Sarah. Any parting words from you?
No, I'm looking forward to that Copa de Cava with you next week. We're going to have some cava together. No champagne in Catalunya. They'll kick us out.
Good point. Okay, that's the first lesson. Okay, great. Cava it is. Great. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Want to stop juggling spreadsheets, calendars, and a dozen apps just to run your rentals? Lodgify makes it easy. It's an all-in-one toolkit for hosts. Build a direct booking website, automate guest messaging, and keep all your channels in sync. Running your rental business your way has never been simpler. And for Good Morning Hospitality listeners, you can get 20% off any yearly plan with code GMH20. Just check the link in the show notes to get started today.